Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Joseph, and today I'm with Matilda again. Today I am not focusing on showing you guys a light setup or anything. Today's video is all about camera profiles. Some of you guys have been asking if the camera profiles affect the pictures, and I'm always saying that in raw images it doesn't really affect them unless you're shooting JPEGs. But today we're going to test it out and see if truly it only affects JPEGs or raw files. So I'm going to be shooting in raw and JPEG, and then we're going to be looking at the differences between all the profiles, how it affects the JPEGs and how it affects the raw files. So I'm shooting with a Canon, and I know Nikon and Sony have, and even Fuji have like different camera profiles. But I'm going to start off with auto. We're going to go to standard, we're going to go to portrait, landscape, fine detail, neutral, and we're going to go to we'll try the monochrome also, and then I have a custom profile that I normally shoot with. So we're going to go through all of them, jump onto my screen and look at the differences as well. So are you ready? All right, okay. So let's just start with the shoot. So I'm shooting with my Canon EOS R and the Sigma 85 1.4 art lens. We're going to start off with choosing the auto picture profile. I'm shooting in auto white balance. I'm shooting raw and JPEG, so we can have access to the raw files and the JPEGs. And I'm going to first off look at my camera settings and see if it's going to work with what we're doing. So looking at the current exposure with my trigger off, this is what the EVF is showing me. It's a little bit underexposed, but we still have the ambient light and the light from the video showing or affecting the image. So I'm going to take my aperture to f2.8, and I'm going to drop my ISO down to 100, and also, actually let me just go further on my aperture because I don't want to adjust my shutter speed. So f4.5 I think is still enough because of the distance between here and the background. We'll still get a lot of depth. So I'm going to take this as my first test shot and review the image. And you can see it's really dark. It's just the orange outfit that's standing out, and that's fine. Once we don't have a lot of light affecting her skin tone, I think we can move on from here. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is turn on my trigger now and just take a test shot to figure out if the light is okay for what we are doing. And it's a little bit underexposed, so it means I have to increase my flash power. Currently is 1/64 on the 8600, so I'm going to go all the way to 1/32. Take another test, and that's quite bright. I think the exposure looks well. Let me look on my histogram. The histogram says it's still underexposed, so instead of doing 1/200, I'll bring my shutter speed to 1/160. Take another test. Yeah, I think this is okay. I can adjust further if I have to using Camera Raw or when I jump onto my computer. I don't want us to be too concerned about the pose because we're going to be doing side-by-side image analysis. I just want you to find one pose that you're going to be comfortable with, and then we'll stick to that, and I'll just be running through the profiles and taking shots, so we don't have to, like, you know, do any poses or anything of the sort. So is this what you're going to be doing for all the shots? Are you going to be comfortable doing this? Yeah, I think it's fine. Okay, so keep that. Okay, so this is the first shot with the, I actually think this is a little bit too strong. So let me do without it first and see. Yeah, I like the contrast that this gives. I'm not going to add a reflector to the shot. So let me just take my final frame. Yeah, okay, I like this. So I'm going to create a folder and make sure that the images that I'm doing from the profiles are separate so I can see exactly what I'm getting. So this is going to be the first shot that I'm going to take with the auto camera profile. Okay, I'm going to go back and then move it to standard, take another shot. All right, go back into the profiles again and choose portrait, take another shot, All right. Then we're going to go back into the settings again, go into landscape, take another test. All right. Go back, go into fine detail, take another shot. And I'm struggling here, guys, because the 85 is a heavy lens. Okay, I'm going to neutral, take another. Neutral really sucks out all of the colors. I can see that right here. And now I'm in faithful. Faithful used to be my favorite camera profile, especially when I'm shooting events, but now I'm always using my custom profile. So now we're in monochrome, which is like essentially black and white. Okay, and we're going to go into the custom setting, which is what I did for my EOS R right there. So now that we're done testing with all these camera profiles, including my custom profile, I don't want to waste the setup and the model's time. So I'm just going to take a few more frames using my custom profile, take a few shots, and those ones are going to be a little bit directed. So enjoy the B-roll of the shoot, and then we're going to jump onto my screen afterwards. Hey guys, and welcome back to my screen. I have already looked at the images and I have renamed all of them to match the camera profiles that I was shooting in. All the files here are RAW, CR3 Canon files for my EOS R, and JPEG files because I was shooting RAW and JPEG, because in the beginning I established the fact that when you're shooting in RAW, the picture profiles don't necessarily affect them, but if it's when you're shooting in JPEG, that is when the picture profiles affect the images, and that's what we're going to look at right now. So all of the RAW files are coded red and all of the JPEGs are coded yellow, just so I can separate them easily. So for example, if I just want all the RAW files, I can just click on the red label, and that is just going to pull out all of the RAW files. And if I just want the JPEGs as well, I can also just pull those out and separate it from the RAW files. But for now, we're going to start looking at both of them. So if I look at the very first image, which was shot in auto, and I just make them a little bigger, this is the RAW file and this is the JPEG in auto. All right, you can see that the RAW file stay the same, but looking at the JPEG, there is a difference in the color, right? It's the same pose, same everything, but there's a huge difference between the auto JPEG and then the auto RAW file. So we're going to go back into the standard as well. So looking at the standard also, you can see the difference. The RAW file looks really, really close to the auto setting, and the JPEG version looks quite similar to that of the auto, but we're going to compare all the JPEGs really, really soon. I just want to run through the differences and see if you can see anything. So this is portrait, and the left is the RAW file, the right is the JPEG. Now you can see that the profiles are not being embedded in the RAW files, but in the JPEGs it's really affecting them and tuning them according to the profile. So now we're looking at landscape, and in landscape also you can see the difference. You can see the RAW file still looks similar to even the auto or standard or portrait that we have looked at so far. So I'm moving on to fine detail again. You can see RAW file stays the same and the JPEG is colored. Again, if you look at neutral used to be one of my favorite profiles. It was neutral and faithful that I used to shoot at, but for the longest time now I'm using my custom profile. But for now, let's just run through faithful and monochrome. All right, I really love the neutral look, because then it gives you the ability to pull in as much details as you want. But then again, why would you want to color grade a JPEG when you have more flexibility with RAW? All right, so the next one is faithful. and you can see the raw file still looks the same, but then the JPEG is color toned. Now the next one is monochrome, and this is where you can see that truly picture profiles do not affect your raw files. So sometimes I do this, especially when I want to do a silhouette shot or when I want to do a black and white shot for my client. I would just tweak the picture profile to monochrome, and it's going to let me see how it's going to look like when I convert it to black and white, or in the final shot for my silhouette. So all that I am concerned about then is my lighting. So I need to make sure that the lighting looks great and I'm not too concerned about color. So sometimes I use the monochrome picture profile in camera, knowing that when I come back it's still going to be colored, and I can, you know, push and pull the settings to get the black and white effect that I want. Or later on, if the client decides, yo, I just want to have like a colored version of this image, you don't now have to recolor the image because it was raw. You still have access to the colors, and then you can deliver the images to your client. All right, so the last one is going to be my custom profile. So this, the JPEG looks really saturated and it looks nice, you know, skin tone looks great and everything, but then again the raw file looks the same. I shoot with this picture profile because of the display on my Canon EOS R, and it makes everything look really nice and neutral, you know, on the back of my screen. Because again, if I go back to the neutral picture profile, you can see that it looks desaturated, and when you're shooting this way and show it to a client, they may not necessarily see the beauty in what you're creating. You know, if you show them fine detail, everything looks too saturated. If you look at standard as well, it's still the same level of saturation. So sometimes they may complain, oh, my skin looks too orangey, or my skin looks too this or that, depending on the lighting conditions as well. But if you're shooting with a custom profile, you're able to tweak the settings, as I've already done, to neutralize any large hue shifts, you know, so that you're having a decent level of color in your images. Nothing is too saturated, nothing is too punchy, the contrast is just perfect, everything is just tweaked down to look as good as possible in camera. Right now I'm going to start comparing all of the JPEGs. So I'm starting off with the auto, then I'm going to click on standard, portrait, landscape, fine detail, neutral, faithful, monochrome, and my custom profile. Now all of them aren't fitting on the screen yet, so maybe let's just look at them like this, and then I'm going to go down and pair them. Auto, standard, fine detail, and my custom profile look very similar, so let me just select those. So auto, standard, fine detail, and my custom profile, right? These look really similar, but again, the last image on the right is my custom profile, and it looks a little bit better in my opinion compared, but I think it matches really well with the auto, but I still really like my custom profile. Maybe I'm being biased because I created it, but I really like the way it looks. Okay, so I'm gonna mark these ones as green so that I can differentiate between what I've already selected. So I'm going to go to portrait, landscape, or even just select this so it's easier. All right, so now we have the rest of the picture profiles, which is portrait, landscape, neutral, faithful, and monochrome. Now first one is portrait. You can see it looks really reddish, and you can tell from the background, like the background is a red color, but it looks very saturated, and then it's even affecting his skin tone as well. It's pushing a lot of reds, but then in the highlight areas it's dimming it down, because her outfit, for example, if you look at the landscape, which is the one on the right, you can see that the outfit looks flat. You know, the highlight and shadow range looks a little bit flat, but in the portrait is desaturated, almost looking like the way it looks like in the neutral. And the faithful also, I think, looks a little bit more magenta, and monochrome obviously is black and white. But for the skin tone, I think I like the neutral color, because that is if you're shooting JPEGs, because then you can push and pull some of the settings to, you know, make it look a little bit nice. Maybe you can even just test that and see how much range you can pull from a JPEG file. So I'm clicking this and opening it in Camera Raw, and the first thing I'll do is maybe just bump up the saturation a little bit, and you can see the color looks off. This really isn't the best. Maybe I'm just going to put the highlights down a little bit, and maybe just cool down the temperature as well. Add a little bit of magenta. Still not really working well for me. Maybe if I spend more time with this, I'll be able to get it to look the way I want. Maybe I'm just going to add some saturation to the reds. and a little bit to the oranges, and maybe I'll just move the yellows into a little bit of like a red tone. And now I think it's beginning to look better. Let me take the yellows all the way. Yeah, I think all the way to the left is better. Now we're beginning to get color tone that looks decent. So I'm going to go into luminance and yeah, maybe just brighten the oranges a little bit. But you can see you don't really have as much flexibility with like color grading a JPEG file as you would if it was a RAW file. All right. So I have applied the settings and now this is how the neutral looks, but you know, I don't want that. So I'm just quickly going to undo that. So back to default, as shot, go here and go to default, 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 press done. And now we are back to the normal neutral profile that we started shooting with. One thing I also want to look at is sharpness, because some of these custom profiles have different levels of saturation, contrast, and sharpness and all that. So I just want to see if it's embedded in the JPEG as well. So I'm going to start off with auto and standard. So I'm going to zoom in to the auto image and let me just do 100% and do the same thing to the eye of the standard. Now you can see that the standard obviously is a lot sharper than the auto, and that is because the standard just, you know, enhances a lot of detail in the image. We can even compare it to fine detail to see if there's even more of a change in the quality or the sharpness. So again, if you're shooting in any of these profiles, you may want to use standard or fine detail, since that resolves a lot of detail. Or maybe you want to tweak the settings yourself later by adding sharpness yourself. Then you can shoot in auto or maybe neutral. Let's see what neutral does as well. So neutral compared to auto and compared to fine detail. Just zooming into the eye, zooming into the eye, zooming into the eye. Again, you can see fine detail resolves a lot of detail. Neutral is also really soft, and that is also going to give you the room to play with the sharpness level yourself. All right, now looking at monochrome, monochrome reserves a lot of detail, but then again, there's no color, but there's a lot of contrast. You can see the highlights, right? And then you can see the shadows are very deep, and that is enhancing the contrast. And I think that is even what is affecting the sharpness as well. Now looking at my custom profile, you can see that it resolves a lot of detail. The color is also a little bit too much in my opinion, so maybe I'll go back and tweak it a little bit more. But for now, I think I'm okay with the way it looks on the camera screen, and the clients normally appreciate it. But mostly I'm also shooting tethered to an iPad, so I mean, it's just the JPEG previews that you're seeing. This doesn't look so bad. All right, so I think this is it. So let's just move on to the raw files. So I'm gonna start off with auto all the way to my custom profile, and you can see that there is no change in the lighting exposure. There's no change in the colors. Everything looks the same. So now we're just gonna start pairing them. So auto and standard, you can see that they all look the same, right? There is absolutely no difference at all. So this is actually what the camera resolved on set. You can see that the sharpness isn't too enhanced. It's decent, right? It's just perfect, and so you can enhance it if you want. I normally don't add sharpness to my images, but you can do that if you want. So I'm going to look at portrait and landscape, and you can see all the differences that we were seeing initially are not there. So let me just make the JPEGs visible. So portrait, raw, and JPEG, and then I'm going to fine detail, raw, and fine detail JPEG. Now you can see that the raw files look exactly the same, but the JPEGs have a lot of difference. Maybe what is going to make you see the difference a lot more is if I select the portrait raw, portrait JPEG, and go to monochrome raw and monochrome JPEG, you can see that the raw files look exactly the same, but the JPEGs are affected by the color profiles. We have a lot of magenta in the JPEG portrait, and the monochrome portrait is just black and white. So yeah, let me know if this tutorial has been helpful, if it's been able to let you understand how picture profiles work. Leave a comment down below and let me know if you're also shooting custom profiles, or if you choose any of the profiles that come with your camera, if there are any specific ones that you like using for specific things. Maybe when you're shooting landscape, you like to choose the landscape setting. If you're shooting portraits, you select the portrait. Like, what or how do you use your camera profiles? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Remember, don't ever give up.